So we are going to cover and learn about the media player beta version of the media player in Construct. So as of version 1.44 of the UI plugin, as well as CH5 version 2.17, we now support a beta version of the media player, and that's what we're going to cover today. Now, before we do get started, a few things to note. It is always a good idea to read the release notes, particularly for this component, because it is in beta mode, right? Or is this a beta version? So there are things it can do and things that it cannot do or are not supported just yet. So it's a good idea to go over the release notes to make sure what can or cannot be tested. Okay, now for the purpose of our lesson here, we are going to use a Crestron piece of hardware, which is the DM-NAX4ZSP. So that is what you're going to see in these series of videos. Now, as far as the services that are currently supported by the beta version, not all of them are, right? So if you look at the streaming services available to something like an NAX or maybe a third-party device, it's going to be a bigger list than what we have here. So for the time being, the ones that have been tested and fully certified to operate with the beta player or the beta version of the media player will be Tidal, Pandora, Internet Radio, SiriusXM, and podcasts. Now, for the series of lessons that we are going to cover, we are going to use Internet Radio, because that is probably one of the easiest things to cover and it's easily accessible. So the example you're going to be seeing when we do get this thing up and running will be of the Internet Radio, but I will show you how the other services are integrated into the media player. Let's go ahead and go into Construct. So I've gone ahead and started a solution and a project. We do have one page. Now, we are going to be using a TST-1080 in this particular project, right? You can use whatever interface you want. If you want to go 4K, you can do 4K, but for the purpose of our class here, we are going to use a TST-1080 in landscape. Now, in the other, further down the road, or further down when we cover more of the media player in this series, we're also going to cover different resolutions and show you how that works, creating breakpoints and such. For now, though, we're going to start out with the landscape, and it's a TST-1080 in landscape mode. Now, the media player itself, where do you find this? Well, if you look at the block manager, if you're familiar with Crestron Construct, you go to the block manager, and then you will find a category called Crestron Widgets, or a folder called Crestron Widgets. In there, you will find the media player beta. Here it is. So go ahead and grab one of those and drop that into the page. Just like any other component, you can resize on the fly. So if you wanted to do a full screen, for example, you can just do that. You can also just take advantage of the property grid here. So this is a 1280 by 800s page, for example. So we can just do that and then just line up the media player accordingly. So this is the full version of the media player. And I say full version because it does have a compact or a mini mode. So something that is worth noting and very important to know about the media player is that when you resize it, it's not just resizing based on the size of the panel, but it can also resize based on the orientation of the panel. So for example, here's the compact mode. So if you were to create this for a mobile device, such as a phone, which is often viewed in portrait mode rather than landscape, then there is a portrait version or a smaller version of the compact portrait version, I guess is the best way to put it, of the media player. Okay, and that will adjust accordingly. This is not a setting you have to do in the property grid. This happens as soon as you resize the media player and it starts going into a smaller form factor or a smaller display. So the compact mode will automatically kick in. It's not something you set within the application's properties. So that is important to know because we are going to see that a little later. For now, though, we are going to use the full version of the media player and keep it in landscape mode. Now, as you are aware, the property grid is context aware. So we are now looking at the properties for the media player. Now, if you have gone through the other classes, as far as Construct goes, then we are now, or you will be well aware of how the property grid works. Okay, it's split into two sections. You have your interactions, And then you have your CSS properties, or you may know them as your global and local properties. So that part hasn't changed. The media player still supports said structure. What is noteworthy is that as far as what is available in the property grid, you will find that most of it, in fact, the vast majority of the properties that you end up modifying in the media player are CSS properties. As far as the actual functionality and the layout and what is available on the media player itself, that is at this time locked down. What do I mean by this? Well, that means that, for example, let's talk about the transport control. You can't customize this. So if you don't, for example, you can't remove the thumbs up and the thumbs down. You can't change the way the transport control is laid out or customize which transport controls you see. Or the information, the metadata, how it's actually shown on the media player. That's all fixed, as well as the tools, right? So these are all locked down, if you will, and are only customizable in the sense that you can change the colors, text size, maybe the font, but nothing in the base code. So that is what I was talking about, and that when you look at the property grid, you will see mostly CSS properties. In fact, you see a lot of color patches here, or color squares, which indicate some property within the media player itself. But that's all you are able to modify. So for all intents and purposes, the functionality itself is locked down. Now, as far as what you can modify, this is well, let's talk about the contract versus join. So this is a contract-only component. Notice you will not find an option for press joins. You have it for visibility and enable, but not for press. In fact, the contract is just automatically generated as soon as you hit save. So you don't even need to turn the contract on for the media player, but it is a contract-only component. That is important to know. As far as your CSS properties go, what can you modify? Well, they do have their own property blocks here. So depending on what it is you're trying to modify, you just go to the appropriate property block. For example, on the overall appearance. So the background color of our media player is currently white, right? If you wanted to change the color, the fill, that would be appearance and then fill color. And at this point, you can either put your own values in hexadecimal or RGB, or you can use the color picker. So if, for example, let's just put a color here. There you go. All right, so whatever color you end up choosing, that ends up being the background color. The default is white. You also have the border color. So if you had a border, you can change the color on that, but that is all under the appearance. Okay, you can also play with the border thickness, border style, etc. Label styles. So if you make a change here, you will see here on the media player. So let's choose a color. So that affects the label. So in this case, song title, artist name, that's the color that is, or that's the property where the color is changing. What else do we have? Secondary color. That would be the two lines underneath the song title and artist name. So these guys right here. That is what is affected by the secondary color under label styles. You also have the now playing. That would be, now playing would be right here. So if you change the fill color for that, you'll see this change up top. Okay, so that is the now player property, or the color for the now player section of the media player. Transport styles, you can change the icon color. That would be the transports themselves. If you notice right here, this is the color that's changing. We change that to a color that's easily seen. There you go. So that is the transport styles. Icon color. You also have the icon pressed fill color. So when it's pressed, this right here, change that to a There you go. So that's what changes. What else do we have? Well, icon active color. So when the icon itself is active on the transport, so currently it's white, you can now change that to another color. Okay, right here. Icon active fill color, that would be the surrounding color of the icon itself. We can change that too. So if you want to change that to yellow, for example, there it is. There's the change reflected. We have the progress bar color. That would be the... So there's two parts to the progress bar. There's the progress bar color, and then the progress bar active color. So active would be this right here, the one in red, and then the progress bar will be the one here in gray. So if we change the progress bar, so let's say we make that blue, there you go. That is now blue. Whereas the active progress bar color, that would be the one in red. Change that to blue. There you go. Okay, so those are the two parts of the progress bar that you can change colors on. What else do we have? Well, we also have font size. So by default, it's 24, but you can change that to whatever font size suits your need. List styles, that would be over here. So you have the icon color for list styles. If you change that, that would be this property right here, that arrow pointing to the left. In fact, here, let me change it to the color. It's a little more obvious. There you go. It's red. Change it to blue. It's now blue. But that is the list style icon color. That would be this guy right here. Icon fill color. So there you go. So that would be same icon, right? Except the fill color this time around. You have item active fill color. So that would be the text lines, right? The fill color for the text lines. Very easy to see. Border color, right? If you're using a border, change the color of the border itself. There you go, right? There's your border color. You can also change the border thickness. And then finally, we have the style of the border. So you can do a solid border, you can do a dotted border, whatever suits your need. Next up, we have menu style. So that's an icon color for the menu styles. If we make that change, there we go. This is called menu. This is the menu, right? And that's the color that you end up changing with the menu styles icon property. So the final property block is called dialog styles. Now this is a little trickier to figure out what it actually is changing. Now keep in mind the media player is actually a live component. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, if I press, let's say, the magnifying glass, actually no, let's do something that pops up a list. There we go. Like favorites. So it pops up a dialog. And that's what it's talking about. So if you are making changes to the dialog style, so let's say we change the overlay color. So when the dialog box pops up, it will actually change the overlay, basically indicating that you are in fact in dialog mode. So that's what the overlay color changes. Okay, we also have the color itself. So if we pop that open once again, make a change to the color, the dialog text is what changes. We also have input border color. the property called button active label color, button active fill color, and then border color. This is a little tricky to see, so we'll do this in, well, here we go. So watch what happens here. So if I change the button active label color, let's make that red. If I hit the OK, notice the text is red. That's what it changes. Next one is called button active fill color. So let's change that to blue. Okay, same dialog box, nothing until I hit OK. The fill color is now blue. That's what it changes. And then finally, border color. Okay, let's change that to green. And then same thing. Notice this line above OK and cancel is now green. That's the property that it affects. So admittedly, some of these are a little hard to see, but everything can be previewed, which is the good news. And of course, you have the thickness of the border style, and then the font size that you can play with. But those all involve, when it says dialog styles, this is the dialog. So you get different dialogues from the media player depending on which of these buttons you press. For example, again, on the favorites, right? It has to do with the favorites. Anything that basically opens a pop-up. That's what it's covering, or that's what it's modifying as far as the dialogue styles. So now we're going to cover and learn about using the media player in breakpoints, or creating breakpoints with the media player, right? Basically customizing it for other resolution. So we are going to take our original project, TST1080 in landscape mode, and we are going to add a different resolution or different panel to it, particularly portrait panels. Okay. Before we do though, as far as breakpoints are concerned and the media player itself, if we stay in the landscape mode, so right now we have a TST1080 landscape, and then we add another landscape panel. So let's go ahead and do that just to see. So let's say, for example, I add an iPad Pro in landscape, which is just slightly smaller than the TST1080 landscape. We switch over to the iPad Pro. Now it is going to be out of bounds because it's a smaller panel and the original panel had a larger surface area. But we can easily resize and fit this within our new iPad Pro. So let's say, so there we go. So there's an iPad Pro 11 in landscape. As you can see, the formatting of the and the layout of the media player is identical, right? It's still the full media player. It's just in a smaller size. So that part, there's really no dramatic difference there. Now, what if we start adding portrait panels? So instead of a landscape panel, let's add portrait. Let's start with a TST1080 in portrait mode. Okay, based on the resolution inheritance rules, this inherits from the primary panel, which is your TST1080 in landscape mode. So this is what it looks like, right? We were expecting this, given the original or the highest panel it's inheriting from. So let me resize this. So let's go ahead and fit this into our portrait version of the TST1080. Now, it is still the full media player layout, as you can see here. However, it is now in portrait orientation, which is fine. Okay, so that's how you would do a larger panel, if you will, in portrait mode. So where this really differs is if when you start using smaller interfaces, like say a phone, right, or maybe a small tablet. So let's go ahead and do that. I am going to add an iPhone. Maybe any phone, but we're going to do an iPhone in this case. We do have a few to choose from, so I am going to make sure I choose portrait one. So let's go iPhone 16 Plus in portrait mode. That looks good. Now, again, resolution inheritance rules. In this case, we have one portrait panel already, or the larger or large portrait panel, which will now become the primary portrait panel. So if you add more portrait panels after this, smaller ones, then they inherit from this larger portrait panel. So let's go ahead and switch over to the iPhone 16 Plus, and not surprisingly, it is trying to inherit, or did inherit from the previous panel. And it didn't quite do that so well because, well, it's a much smaller interface. So we have to make some adjustments. But when we do, this is when the compact mode of the media player this is when the media player configures itself to the compact mode, if you will. So this is the compact mode. You still get full functionality, however, you now have a couple of pages or multiple pages. So if you click on the musical note icon, it brings you what would have been the right side or the full list menu in landscape mode, and you just cycle between these two pages. Now, this compact mode, if you will, or the mini player, is something that is automatically generated by Construct and the media player component. So it's not anything we have to check or configure within the application itself. It's just that when you put a smaller panel, portrait-oriented smaller panel, or even landscape, right? If you have a smaller landscape panel, it does have a compact mode in landscape as well. But the point here is that it does have a compact mode that it switches to whenever you're using a smaller interface, which makes sense rather than trying to cram all of these controls on a tiny phone. This works well with a larger panel like a TSD 1080, but for smaller interfaces, the compact mode works better. And again, this is something that is automatically done. So that is how media player, or that is how the media player is configured when using breakpoints or when creating breakpoints in a Construct project. Okay, so now that we're done creating and configuring our media player in Construct, how do we program this thing? Well, first thing we need to know is how the contract is generated, or if the contract is generated. So since we are using the latest version of Crestron Construct and the UI plugin, the contract gets generated on save. So in previous versions, you had to hit build before the contract to be generated, right? With the latest version, as soon as you hit save, if there's a contract called out, or right, if there's a contract assigned in the user interface, then it will be built as soon as you hit save, which is exactly what happened here. You might have seen this in the previous lessons. As soon as I hit save, a message popped up on the lower right-hand side of the application that said contract has been generated. So that's how you generate the contract. Now, in this case, I do still need to build the project. But before we do the build, let's make sure that the contract exists. So the best way to do this is to simply go to the Solution Explorer, go to the project name, and then go Show on Disk. Now that takes you directly to the project folder. And inside that should be an output folder, contract, programming, simple, and there it is. That's the CHD file, which we are going to import into Simple Windows and ultimately program. So we're going to do that, but before we do, let's go ahead and build this project. Make sure that everything is good to go, because we are ultimately going to upload this to the web server as well when we test both the program and the project we just created. So while that's building, switch on over to Simple Windows. So I have a Simple Windows program. I've gone ahead and added the key components. So I have an X panel, since we are going to be using X panels for testing. So I've added an X panel 3.0 HTML5 and also the DMNAX4ZSP. Now, this was mentioned in the previous lessons. This is the device that we are going to use, the NAX device that we're going to use to link the media player to the streaming service. If you're not familiar with this particular device, you can always go check out the product page, but here it is. All right, so it's a 4-zone streaming preamplifier, but more importantly, it supports the streaming services that we need for this particular exercise. So this is what we're going to be using, right? So this is officially, or this is certified to work with the media player beta. Okay, and then of course we're going to use the internet radio. So this is the device we're connecting to. Now, as far as configuring said device, there are some things we need to do on the device level itself. That is the 4ZSP. So I've gone ahead and connected to my 4ZSP here. So let's go ahead and log in and show you what it is that needs to be configured here. Okay, so there it is, 4ZSP, go to settings and streaming services. So we do need to establish the streaming services that we are going to be using within the media player. So for this, all you have to do is click on streaming services. Now you do need to create profiles. I've created 2 and they're very easy to do. It's just a matter of clicking on add user profile and then creating a profile. So I have created 2. There's my profile, and then I created one called Bob. And then here are the streaming services that I've assigned for my profile and the one that I assigned to Bob, so that you can see the difference when we test later on. So for my profile, I have Tidal, SiriusXM, Pandora, and Internet Radio. For the Bob profile, there's the Internet Radio. Now, how do you add services? There is a services button next to each profile. If you click on that button, you will see the different services that are available, right? And then you just click the plus sign on the ones that you need, and then delete the ones you don't. So in this case, there's Tidal, SiriusXM, Pandora, Internet Radio. So that's how you would add the profile to the streaming preamp. And of course, that then will get pulled later on when we actually activate the media player. That's the information and the streaming services that the media player will end up pulling from the 4ZSP. So now that we have that done, okay, and we seem to be good to go in Simple Windows, what else do you need to know? As far as the NAX4ZSP goes, the slot that we need to go to is the one called Players. So slot 5 DMNAX4ZSP Players. Click on the plus sign, and then you'll see the 4 players in there. We're only going to be programming player 1, and then you will see that if you click on the plus sign next to player 1, you will see the transport control. So this is what we are going to end up programming as far as the 4ZSP is concerned. Now, we also have to import our definition file into Simple Windows. That's the actual media player definition file. And for that, we need to go to the X panel itself, right-click, manage GUI extenders, or manage GUI extender, which will then prompt us to browse for said file. So in this case, we are looking for a CHD file. So the file path in this case will be solutions. Oh, hang on. It's actually documents. Let's start from the beginning. Documents, Crestron construct, solutions, and then the actual solution name. This one happens to be called Crestron Media Player Demo. Inside that is the project folder, output folder, and then we are looking for that CHD file. So hit contract, programming, simple, and there's our CHD file. So from here we click open, right? Looks like we're good. Commit changes. And now we see our media player definition in simple windows, which there isn't much here, right? Again, this is actually very easy to program. Okay, we are going to take advantage of CRPC communication, which is what makes it easier to program. Now, what else do we need? We need the actual router, or we need a user module to connect the media player with the 4Z-SP. So for that, we are going to need a user module, a Crestron user module, the same one. If you've ever programmed a media player in Smart Graphics and then programmed that in simple Windows, it's the same exact module that you need, which is the router module, if you will. So we go to Crestron modules, and then inside that, you will find a media player folder. And then the one we want is called the Media Server Object Router version 4.0. Grab that, send it to your logic folder. And this is the link, or this will be ultimately the link between the media player and the 4Z-SP. So what do we need to know about this router? Well, let's expand this right here. So if we go to the help file of the router, here's what it tells us. So there's an analog signal line called device select. Value will determine appropriate routing from the media player to and from. That would be these guys right here. That back. And it even cites an example. Oh, by the way, the valid ranges go from 1D to 24D, so it needs a decimal value. And it does provide an example. If device select has a value of 4D, the input signals CRPC from device 4 will be propagated to CRPC2 media player. The input signals CRPC from device 4 will be propagated to CRPC2 media player. Effectively, what it's saying is whatever value you put here, so let's say we wanted to route this through this, which is player 1, this needs a value of 1D, or whatever number you choose. In this case, we'll just program 1, which means we need to send a 1D to the device select so that it knows which of these connections to actually route to the CRPC signal. So for that, we are going to use an analog initialize with a value. Well, we're going to put a 1 because we just want this thing to initialize at boot up, or processor startup, or program startup. And then we give it a value of 1D, which will then tell the module to route this line out here. And then we just give this a name. Okay, so we'll call it media.player device select, and send that to the device select input of the router. All right, what else do we need from the router side? Well, we do need to identify the CRPC values. So let's start here, since this is the one we're going to be routing. So let's give this a name. Call it CRPC.2 player.1. Okay, this is player 1. And if we scroll down, we will see the CRPC signals. So we just take this, route it to the CRPC of player 1. And then on the outside, on the output side, we'll call this CRPC from player.1 and send that to the router. Okay, so there's the connection to player 1, which is really all we need from the 4Z-SP. So we can close this. Now, we do need to route, or make sure that this routes to the media player, which means we have to define these CRPC values. So let's give this a signal name. So CRPC dot to dot media player. And we send this to the media player on the CRPC underscore feedback. Let's give this a name. This will be CRPC dot from media player. There you go. So now all of the CRPC signals are connected. So that's good to go. Now we do have a refresh and an offline signal, so we can go ahead and define those as well. Refresh. Actually, let's call it media dot player dot refresh, and send that to the refresh signal of the media player. And then offline, we'll call this media dot player dot offline. Send that to the offline signal of the media player. Now there is one more thing we need to define, and that would be the message. So if we go back to the help file, we need message from carries configuration messages from the media player. Connect this to the signal, to the message signal on the media player application smart object. In this case, the contract. So we give this a name. Media dot server message, and this needs to go to the media player message underscore feedback signal name. We don't need to define this, at least not yet, that's for future use. And on the media player, we also don't need to define the player name. That too is more or less for future use. So we can go ahead and comment that out. And we don't really need anything else from the router. So we've done everything, we've actually configured everything we need from the router. So I will make this complete so that we don't have an incomplete. And that's it. That's all we have to program. All right, so we are actually ready to compile this. Let's go ahead and compile. And then we will upload this to our processor and load our project as a WebEx panel and then test everything. So transfer, yes. Call up my MC4. Everything seems good. Click send. Meanwhile, I'm going to check on the project. So it does look like my media player project did finish. No issues. Everything's good. So I should be able to load that now as an X panel once this is done. Send. And we should be good in a second. Okay, so that's good. Now we also have to load our X panel. So let's go ahead and do that. So there's the MC4. Go web projects. Okay, make sure it's an archive format or archive file. And then we just look for said file. So it goes Crestron construct solutions, and then solution name, project name, output, and there's my ch5z file. Click open. Okay, make sure that it is loaded as an X panel or both. Just make sure it's not loaded as a ch5. So that is for Crestron 1. So this is good. Click send. And when it's done, we can test it. Okay, so we appear to be done. Exit out of this. So let's test it. So I have a browser. Let's type in the IP address. Okay, so I am going to switch to developer mode. We have a more accurate way of testing. So here we are in dev mode, and there's the project. Okay, so it is connected to the internet radio, but here's how this works. Click home. Okay, so let's select a profile. There's my profile, there's the Bob profile, so let's select mine. Okay, internet radio. I'm gonna do local stations. And then let's pick one. Okay, so seem to be connected. So just to be accurate, let's see what's playing. Offspring. Offspring. It is pulling the correct information and it is streaming correctly. That's good. We can also test the different breakpoints. So let's do a TST 1080 in portrait. So there it is, portrait mode. And then we do have one more. We have a phone. And there is the phone interface and the compact version. And there you go. So let's change stations. Wait for it to refresh. And there's the oldie station. So it does appear to be working. And that is how you program and test the media player.